I join with my colleagues on this side in registering our support for the amendment before us and for this piece of legislation. I do so, Mr. President, not only because it is long overdue, I do so as someone who, though raised in Portmore, St. Catherine, would spend many a summer holiday, many a Easter break, and indeed the occasional Christmas break down on my grandfather's farm in Magotty, St. Elizabeth, where he would, of course, till the soil and do what many tens of thousands of hard-working Jamaicans do every day, Mr. President, produce agricultural output in this country. I tip my hat, I salute our nation's farmers, and I am happy, Mr. President, that this piece of legislation has come at this juncture, because it is my view, Mr. President, that there is nothing more egregious than unlawful actions that break the spirit and shake the resolve of a trying person. The theft of agricultural produce does precisely that. From time to time, we see reports in media, we see reports on the various social media platforms of a farmer, trying farmer in particular, who is shaken, whose spirit may well be broken because of the loss they have suffered when they see a field of produce being stolen, or when they wake up to the bellies of their cattle or small ruminants, as is the case on many occasions. You see farmers who had intended to use the yield from their activity to send their children to school, provide food on the table, and provide for their families generally. You see them being displaced on account of farm theft. And so, Mr. President, I wish to start out in my submissions, my intervention on this piece of legislation by just pointing out to Jamaica, a very intentional and assertive and strident way, that there are really two types of political actors in society. Those who talk about what is to be done, and those who actually get things done, Mr. President. They are talk, we are substance. Our substance, Mr. President, manifests itself in the actions we take. I particularly, at junctures where I have been the presenter of programs on radio, yes, and in other capacities as a public affairs commentator, there have been so many stories up and down the country in relation to this most vexing issue of losses incurred and suffered by our nation's farmers, and then the regime that exists, the legislative scheme that exists, is not demonstrably proportional in terms of the punishment, the fine, the punitive measures that are levied at the offenders in the way they ought to be. And what this piece of legislation before us this afternoon seeks to do is to respond to that, address that, and correct that bit of existing mischief, Mr. President. I welcome this move, Mr. President, because what it does is that it fits nicely with and works together with a number of other measures, incentives, and interventions that serve to make life better for our nation's farmers. Mr. President, it is in the DNA of this Andrew Holness-led Jamaica Labour Party government to take on, address, and respond to, and indeed go on to resolve the hard, vexing, and even elusive in some instances issues that have confronted Jamaican society and have bedeviled the Jamaican people over many years, in some instances. And so, Mr. President, in as much as this amendment to the legislation seeks to correct a long-standing mischief, we see the government doing precisely this in many other areas of national life here in Jamaica. The transformation of the Jamaica Constabulary Force through the provision of policy support and resource support is among them. So much so that we could have had Expo 2.0 on show last week. The National Identification System is one such example. Pensions reform is another example. Harvesting water from the Black River to bring it to the Pedro Plains, to irrigate the Pedro Plains, is game-changing, Mr. President, and this government is dealing with that. Michael Manley spoke about water from the Black River to irrigate the Pedro Plains from as far back as the 1970s. And it has taken Andrew Holness and the government he leads to come and do that, Mr. President. And we are proud on this side of that. Mr. President, for many years, for decades even, there has been talk of a comprehensive rural school bus system. It has taken this Andrew Holness-led Jamaica Labour Party administration to come and now deal with that long, elusive rural school bus system, and we are proud of that, Mr. President. That's what we do on this side. They talk, we are substance. Mr. President, making some workers in the public service permanent, moving them from being casual workers to being permanent workers, like this piece of legislation before us, is also one of the things that have long been outstanding in this country and is being resolved at present. So much so that many categories of school staff, support staff at schools, persons who are employed at the National Solid Waste Management Authority, have now transitioned from being mere casual workers. Yes, and I trust Senator Brown will appreciate that. And workers at RADA, and I suspect that the National Irrigation Commission as well, and other agencies, allied agencies under the auspices of the Ministry of Agriculture and Agriculture, Fisheries and Mining, are now moved from being casual workers to, of course, being permanently employed persons, bringing greater certainty and dignity in terms of their terms of employment to them, Mr. President. And we're delighted for that, and we're proud of that. Mr. President, agricultural output is of incalculable importance. As a number of my colleagues on both sides have observed in this debate, it is the hard work and effort of our farmers that serve to prop up and foster our food security. And our food security, Mr. President, is of considerable moment. Because, as Senator Gale has said, when you look to the medium term and with the developments in the global community at present, uncertainties abound, and of course we have seen hostility and acts of aggression in some parts of the world, all of which may touch and concern and have implications for our own food security here in Jamaica. And as such, putting our Jamaican farmers, putting our Jamaican brothers and sisters in a better position to withstand the vagaries of things, exogenous shocks that may attend upon them, that may confront them from time to time, is of critical importance, and it could not, Mr. President, come a moment too soon. So farm theft has always been the bane of our farmers' existence. It has always been. One of the things you have to appreciate, Mr. President, and much of Senator Thompson's presentation focused attention on the healthcare implications and the healthcare ramifications of farm theft. One of the things we have to appreciate is that when the 2-foot posts, as Senator Morris described them as, and quite correctly so, when they steal and deprive farmers of produce, they don't note, they are not aware that a plot of pak choy or cabbage or some other fresh produce may have been recently sprayed. They may have had agents applied to them. And as you know, in farming, you have to really allow for a certain period of time to elapse to harvest that produce, whether it is lettuce, romaine lettuce or iceberg, or whether it is cabbage. Yes? So when the farmers have their produce stolen, it is to be understood that commodities are coming into the marketplace which may not be wholesome and appropriate for our consumption as humans. So there is that clear public health hazard. And to the extent, Mr. President, that the government is responding by way of this piece of legislation, it is quite evident, Mr. President, that this has implications for safeguarding. Yes, it serves to better safeguard the public health of the Jamaican people. Mr. President, this piece of legislation seeks to strengthen the fines and increase terms of imprisonment. There is an observation the Prime Minister made in recent days that is very instructive. I touched on it last week, and I'm touching on it again this week, because we have a law enforcement piece of legislation before us. And what is to be noted, Mr. President, is that the government is changing the risk-reward dynamic in relation to crime in the country, Mr. President. The man who goes out and steals a goat, steals a cow, whether the cow in calf or not, whether the goat in kid or not, the man who goes out and steals cabbage and tomatoes and cantaloupe, honeydew melon, and other commodities, when he goes out and does that, he does so, Mr. President, because he would have made a calculation in his mind that the reward to be gleaned from engaging in this activity and doing this unlawful thing is worth the risk. But that game is changing now. This administration, this government, led by Andrew Michael Holness, is changing that dynamic. And so, the 2-foot post, instead of us just coming here and being descriptive about it, on this side, my friends, senators opposite, we are very, very prescriptive. We are doing the things that will make life miserable for the 2-foot post. And so, the 2-foot post will have to understand that the fines are going to be that much more punitive. The terms of imprisonment are going to be that much more onerous. And he, I dare say, will have to think again. Even technology, Mr. President, will play a role in this regard. Because in the agricultural space now, many a farmer are making use of closed-circuit television technology, Mr. President. Yes? And of course, with the linkage in terms of the Jamaica Eye network generally, just camera systems across the length and breadth of the country, you find that we may be in a better position to pick up that Pro Box or to pick up that Toyota Wish that is making its way out of a community as the persons who would have stolen some produce seek to make good their escape. And based on the technology that is now in place, based on the government's investments in law enforcement architecture in the country, we are in a better position to not only detect crime, but also apprehend, Mr. President, the very many 2-foot posts up and down the country and let them know, and indeed serve notice to others looking on, that it is better them go up a heart and find something else constructive to do. Because the criminality business is not being countenanced in the country. I dare say, Mr. President, yes, you can tell that to Mayor Andrew Swaby. Yes? Tell that to him and others, that the criminality business in the country, and of course I cast no aspersions on the goodly mayor. I'm just saying what I'm saying. Anyway, just to be very clear, just to be very clear, the propensity, the likelihood of nabbing persons who would seek to deprive our nation's farmers of their hard-earned investments and their hard-earned produce in terms of their agricultural commodities. Yes? It's changing. So, Mr. President, I repeat by saying the risk-reward dynamic in terms of farm theft is changing. So the persons who are inclined so to do need to think again and go find something productive to do. Mr. President, I recall viewing a sitting of the Parliament late last year when the incumbent Agriculture, Fisheries and Mining Minister presented an update on and gave a statement on the build-out of agricultural wardens. He mentioned that it is something being undertaken using the framework of the JCF, the Jamaica Constabulary Force, and he set out a number of provisions and the thrust of this particular intervention. Many have waxed warm over the years, Mr. President. Many have commented on, many have registered their disgust at farm theft. But they did not come with the agricultural wardens in as organized and as comprehensive a way as this government is doing in this dispensation, Mr. President, and we welcome that. Because we know that having the fines adjusted, and of course, my leader of government business here in the Senate mentioned that as she piloted and opened the debate on this piece of legislation. We know that in relation to the fines and the terms of imprisonment, those by themselves do not bring about enforcement. We need the human resources and we need technology to be able to enforce what we have on the books. Because as Senator Scott Motley said earlier, in comparing a dispensation past with the present, she made the point about persons, wardens at the river who would essentially ensure that, persons are operating in a prescribed manner and so on. So we know that when a law exists on the books, it really is inadequate, and it is better to have the wherewithal and the enforcement capacity to do the actual enforcement. That is very important, Mr. President. Mr. President, farm theft is driven by demand. It is driven by, and I think it was the leader of government business in the Senate who made the observation earlier this morning about farm theft, that we may see the man who steals the cabbage as a 2-foot puss, but in many instances, there's a sophisticated, a calculated, and organized network of criminality underpinning the farm theft that we see in our midst. So there is a person who will be bringing the stolen meat to their meat shop or their restaurant, and that eventually goes on to us, members of the public, as end product users. And so we need to appreciate and understand that paying focused attention to this vexing issue of farm theft and building the requisite capacity to better superintend agricultural enterprise across the country and better apprehend the violators is of critical importance, Mr. President. And so I am making a call, Mr. President, for a degree of reparatory focus going forward. Ask Mark Golding. Ask Mark Golding what anything reparatory or reparations mean. I set you up and you fall in the trap, yes? I set you up and you fall in the trap. Mr. President, when a farmer loses produce, whether it is a goat, sheep, fowl, cow, or commodities, crops, the whole notion of the offender going off to prison doesn't compensate for his or her loss. The cow that female farmer was banking on to be able to find the school fee to send her daughter, Mr. President, to university, the fact that someone was ultimately caught and imprisoned, or the person pay a fine and so on, doesn't necessarily bring redress to that person. And that is why our reparatory focus is of some moment, to be able to better compensate farmers for their losses. Not only in cases where it was recovered, because you may have stolen agricultural produce, including livestock, recovered. But in some instances, in many instances indeed, the agricultural produce of which our farmers are fleeced, of which our farmers are deprived on account of theft of that produce, they are not able to be restored with them. So it just goes as a loss. And so it is important, Mr. President, perhaps some kind of fund could be earmarked, because the idea would be to have the fines paid by these offenders going into a special farm theft recovery fund, so that farmers can be supported and derive some degree of recompense having suffered considerable loss. Mr. President, there are some who wax warm about the establishment of an agricultural development fund. I heard Senator Gabriela Morris make mention of this proposal that the PNP is coming with, which is just a fly-by-night, make-it-up fund that they're talking about. Because just to be clear, Mr. President, when Dayton Campbell, the PNP's embattled and controversial General Secretary, spoke at a meeting in St. Elizabeth to a group of farmers, perhaps he thought that he was speaking only to a group of farmers. Perhaps he didn't recognize, Mr. President, that he was being recorded. He spoke, Mr. President, and in conveying an idea to the farmers, he made mention of the Tourism Enhancement Fund. He made mention of the Universal Access Fund of old. It is now properly the Universal Service Fund. And we went on to say, now is the time for us to add a little thing, speaking about new monies, yes, and a new fund. It is only in the circumstance, Mr. President, where members of the public, myself included, made mention of the tax, the business of tax, that Dayton Campbell, Mark Golding, and the PNP is proposing to take Jamaica back to, that they decided to back off. And as they often seek to do in hoodwinking, and of course, yes, pivoting, that new fund that they had initially conceived of, Dayton Campbell made the rounds in media, pivoting away to suggest that the fund that he's referring to would be capitalized by the existing import duties, when in fact, Mr. President, that was never the intention, because the truth is, and I am putting it to Dayton Campbell and the PNP here today, I am putting it to them this afternoon, Mr. President. When Gabriela Morris makes mention of being able to provide additional incentives and do all kinds of things for farmers, the question is, where the new money going to come from, because every dollar of the current regime in terms of import duties goes to fund and finance something, a program or an activity that exists here in Jamaica at present. So where the new money going to come from magically, so to do. In other words, the better question, Mr. President, is what will Dayton Campbell, or what would rather Dayton Campbell and the PNP propose to discontinue or stand down in order to do the wish list things, the pie-in-the-sky promises that they are promising the Jamaican people and, of course, our hard-working farmers up and down the country. Which of the existing programs will a PNP administration stand down or discontinue? Mr. President, I put it to you that suggestion of an agricultural development fund is nothing but a three-card trick and a Samfi business, Mr. President. Samfi business. Because the very idea of speaking to and referring to a fund as this discrete fund that you're going to be able to do a number of things from is just very offensive. Take people for fool. Take big man and big woman in this country for fool, the PNP. That is what is in their DNA. They have always done it. They are doing it, and I suspect, Mr. President, they will always do it. But guess what? Jamaica is a wise place today. Jamaica has awakened to their kind of Samfi approaches and suggestions in relation to the governance of this country. And so, Mr. President, the parliamentary opposition needs to tell us which of the roads that are slated for repair they are going to discontinue. They need to tell us which production incentive they are going to discontinue, which irrigation system that will be provided to farmers as proposed by this Andrew Holness-led Jamaica Labour Party government that they would discontinue, since they're going to, and since they're proposing to, create the special agricultural development fund out of or from the import taxes that we get in part. Yes? They need to tell us which of the current programs, which seedlings to farmers, which fertilizer to farmers, which baby chickens to farmers, which production incentive would the PNP propose to discontinue in order to do Dayton Campbell's pie-in-the-sky wish list promise? So, Mr. President, when the members opposite made their contribution to the debate, they did what they typically do, paid lip service and spoke with platitudes about their support for agriculture and their commitment to agriculture. Never mind the fact that their professed support and commitment is never backed up by or underpinned by actual action, certainly when they form government and are in a position, Mr. President, as we have seen in the past, to do so. You have never seen the professed support for agriculture being backed up meaningfully by action and legislative provisions, really. So egregious, Mr. President, is the current state of play that, notwithstanding the PNP's professed commitment to agriculture and love for the nation's farmers, they haven't seen it fit to afford the farmers a voice on the opposition benches in the parliament, Mr. President. There is no opposition spokesman on agriculture in the lower house or here in the Senate, Mr. President. The opposition spokesperson on agriculture, Imdia Bush, Crystal Lee, sent Dayton Campbell packing from St. Ann Northwestern. He does not hold a place in this parliament, and I trust the good people of Westmoreland Eastern will do the right thing and return their proven performer, their hard-working member of parliament, Danny Lawrence of the JLP, to this place to continue to work on their behalf and not send Dayton Campbell to the lower house. The PNP have no regard for the farmers, Mr. President. The senators opposite, none among them serve as the spokesperson on agriculture. None among them in the lower house serve as the spokesperson on agriculture. And the simple question this morning, Mr. President, as they squeal over on that side is, what can go so? What can go so?
Speaker's time has expired.
10 minutes, Mr. President.
10 minutes. Senator Morris.
It's 10 minutes.
Just hold a second, Senator Morris. Yes, go ahead.
Mr. President, the Speaker's time having been expired, may his time be extended for him to complete his presentation.
The question is, Speaker's time be extended for him to complete his presentation. Those in favor? Aye. Those against, the ayes have it. Senator Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. And while the Senator Brown opposite, babbles, and from time to time, you would hear him making the point, Mr. President, that the Prime Minister must call it. What they don't realize is that the longer it takes for call is the more points you guys lose in the poll and the more seats the PNP will be losing in the elections. So, as it is said here in Jamaica, Mr. President, because we're not tapanars, we understand the vernacular and we understand Jamaican proverbs very well. Fire, they are most stale, and think a cool breeze. Mr. President, go and check the Blue Dot polls. The JLP is 4% ahead of the PNP in the Blue Dot polls. And Mr. President, so not only is the PNP found wanting, the opposition found wanting in relation to not having an opposition spokesperson on this most important sector. This is a production sector, Mr. President. Agriculture, fisheries, and mining are production areas. And on the agriculture and fisheries side, their spokesperson does not have a place here in the Houses of Parliament. And Mr. President, when they were in an opportunity, because you heard Senator Gabriela Morris giving sweet lip service, seeking to target the farmers up in Northwest St. Anne. But Crystal Lee's on top of things. She's on top of things. You know why? You know why she's on top of things, Mr. President? Between January 2012, if you take note, you will learn some things. Just take some note. And you may want to make a note of this one. Between January 2012 and February 2016, Senator Janice Allen, yes? I'm advised that some 24 farm roads were attended to in this country. 24 dege roads. 24, Mr. President. Between January 2012, when the Simpson-Miller administration took office, Mr. President, the same people who are seeking to hoodwink and suggest that they support farmers and are keen on agriculture and their support for agriculture in this country. Between January 2012, when Mrs. Simpson-Miller's administration took office, and February 2016, when they invariably lost power and were kicked out of office, yes? 24 farm roads were addressed by them in their term of office. That's a crying shame, Mr. President, a crying shame. And in this term of office, Mr. President, these past two terms, between March 2016 and present, I'm advised that over 400 farm roads have been attended to in this country, Mr. President. Mr. President, some people among us are about talk and some are about action. We on this side are substance. We are about improving the lives of our farmers. We are about improving the lives of the Jamaican people. And Mr. President, as I wrap up, irrigation. Irrigation, irrigation, irrigation. It is the means by which a farmer who is in the business of cultivating crops is able to sustain the acreage under production. The PNP, Mr. President, as I am advised by the Agriculture Minister, did no irrigation system in that term of office between January 2012 and February 2016. Yes? None. And as such, Mr. President, at present, we know of irrigation that is being brought on stream in relation to St. Catherine, Clarendon, and of course St. Elizabeth. We have had the Essex Valley Commission so far, and as I said earlier in my contribution to this debate, the Pedro Plains irrigation is coming on stream. And Mr. President, in enabling our farmers to be more resilient and navigate the vicissitudes of the drought, the Agriculture Ministry has issued or is issuing irrigation kits, Mr. President, drip irrigation in particular, to better enable our farmers to navigate drought conditions, because we know that that enables us, that enables farmers to be resilient. Cold storage, Mr. President. Just like these increased fines and increased terms of imprisonment, it's an issue that has been particularly contentious. From time to time, we see our nation's farmers, Mr. President, having to discard or leave in the field to rot or otherwise feed it to animals, yes? Their produce that have not come to perfection because of drought. And we know the impact that that has on consumers. Even Senator Brown, who is babbling incessantly over there. So, Mr. President, Bagline Chief. Babline Chief. Mr. President, it is this government that has brought cold storage for our farmers to reality, to fruition over there in Manchester. And the farmers up in Belfield, Mr. President, the farmers up in Belfield, where Rhoda Moy Crawford stands tall as the representative of the people. Yes? The farmers in Belfield are pleased with the cold storage facility. They recognize that it will help them to be able to harvest and secure their produce when it is, harvested in a way that keeps it, sustains it, and enables them to be able to, derive income from their hard-earned investments, because no longer does their produce have to be rotting in the field because of drought conditions or, gluts on the market. So cold storage assists us, Mr. President, as end product users, whether we are at the hotels or whether we are at home. Yes? Cold storage facilities helps with the evening out of the supply chain. We don't have these extremes, or we're not likely to have these extremes persisting in the way they persisted and were prevalent in a dispensation past. Because the more the government brings newer technology and mechanisms such as cold storage facilities on stream, we'll be able to store agricultural produce, so the price of tomatoes, for example, and sweet pepper don't go through the roof in one instance and then come back to dirt cheap in another instance. So even Lambert Brown, when he goes to the marketplace, Mr. President, he doesn't have to, babble with the market vendor about the price of the carrot or the price of the sweet pepper. So, Mr. President, finally, I welcome, Mr. President, the intervention of the Agriculture Minister in relation to the financial resources that are now being made available. He would have announced it, I believe, in Tuesday, the additional support that will be provided to our farmers for drought mitigation. It's another intervention, Mr. President, aimed at building and shoring up the resilience of our hard-working and deserving farmers in this country. Again, Mr. President, some are talk. On this side, we are substance. And we say to the Jamaican people, when you consider the reverse income tax credit, the micro stock exchange that is coming on stream, this $10 million for farmers that Flood Green has announced in recent days to help you with black tanks or to help you with irrigation facility and capacity. When you consider the cold storage equipment, or the facility rather, when you consider the irrigation kits, I'm saying to my Jamaican brothers and sisters, Mr. President, when you consider the Western Children and Adolescent Hospital that will soon be open, when you consider the brand new Cornwall Regional Hospital that will soon be open, when you consider the establishment of a social pension for persons aged 75 and older, Mr. President, when you consider the dismantling of the gangs. When we took office, Mr. President, police intelligence indicated that there were just about 350 gangs in operation in the country. At present, police intelligence indicates that that has been slashed drastically to about 80 odd, Mr. President. When the people of Jamaica consider the newly built and opened forensic pathology autopsy suite, when the people of Jamaica consider road construction up and down the country, Mr. President, not least, the South Coast Highway Improvement Project, not least, the East-West Highway linking Maypen to Williamsfield in Manchester, Mr. President, and of course, when they consider that wonderful, magnificent Montego Bay Perimeter Road that you will welcome, Mr. President, I am sure. And even those who will not be successful in St. James Central, when they go up against a colossus named Heroy Clark, even they, I trust, on behalf of the people who they were seeking to secure the support from, they will be happy for them. And Mr. President, when you consider September morning, when those new rural school buses will roll out, they will go up into the highways and the byways. They will go up into the nook and cranny. Minister Dana Morris-Dixon, on that fateful September morning, Mr. President, as Education, Skills, Youth and Information Minister, will be there to meet them, Mr. President. And I say to Senator Brown and others, prepare to meet us there. That September morning, Mr. President, will be a September to remember in relation to the rural school bus system. And for those reasons and more, Mr. President, I urge my Jamaican brothers and sisters, as my armband is saying this afternoon, choose Jamaica on that fateful day. I thank you, Mr. President. May it please you.
All right. Thank you very much.